Good day to all. We'll now continue with the special penal laws coverage of your refresher course program. Let's start with the Chainsaw Act of 2002. I think not all of you are familiar with this law, so we'll just focus on the salient features on what this law is all about. What is a chainsaw? It refers to any portable power saw or similar cutting implement rendered operative by an electric or internal combustion engine or similar means that may be used for but is not limited to the felling of trees and or cutting of timber. Now, last time we have there the Coconut Preservation Act, and one of the punishable act there is the cutting of coconut without permit. Same with a particular provision, one of the provisions in the revised forestry code wherein a person may be made liable under the law for possessing this timber illegally cut because of lack of prior permit. Aside from those similar act, if a chainsaw is used in the cutting of this lumber, timber, or coconut for that matter, and the chainsaw is not registered, that would mean a separate charge against you for violating RA 9175. Who can possess or use a chainsaw? The department is hereby authorized to issue permits to possess and or use a chainsaw for the felling land or cutting of trees, timber, and other forest or agroforest products to any applicant who has a subsisting timber license agreement, producing sharing agreement, or similar agreements, or a private land timber permit. In other words, it is not just anybody who can just possess or use a chainsaw. Who else is an orchard and fruit tree farmer? Because basically this chainsaw is an essential implement or tool in the orchard of that particular farmer. You also have there an industrial tree farmer, is a licensed wood processor, and the chainsaw shall be used for the cutting of timber that has been legally sold to said applicant, or shall use the chainsaw for a legal purpose. Take note that even agencies of the government that use chainsaws must likewise secure the necessary permit from the department before operating a chainsaw. What are the punishable acts under the law? You have there selling, purchasing, reselling, transferring, distributing, or possessing a chainsaw without a proper permit. Again, who can be issued a permit to any of those enumerated? And if you does not belong to any of those, of course, you will not be issued a permit. So if you sell, purchase, resell, transfer, distribute, or possess a chainsaw, then for sure you can be made liable under the law. Unlawful importation or manufacturing of chainsaw is another punishable act under the law. You also have there tampering of engine serial number of the chainsaw. Actual unlawful use of chainsaw, this is the actual use. So those are the pertinent punishable acts under the law. So please take note of them. Next, we have PD 1865. So basically, this law amends BP Bilang 33 on regulating this sale of petroleum products. So what are the prohibited acts under the law? You have their illegal trading in petroleum and or petroleum products. It also punishes adulteration of furnished petroleum products or possession of adulterated finished petroleum products for the purpose of sale, distribution, transportation, exchange, or barter, and also under delivery or underfilling beyond authorized limits in the sale of petroleum products or possession of underfilled liquefied petroleum gas cylinder for the purpose of sale, distribution, transportation, exchange, or barter. So, by these prohibited acts, what do we mean by illegal trading? There are actually many acts constituting illegal trading, and some of them are as follows. If you sell or distribute petroleum products without license or authority, of course, you are engaged in illegal trading. It would also include you have there a license to sell petroleum products, however, you failed to issue receipt. Further, refilling of liquefied petroleum gas cylinders without authority from said bureau or refilling of another company's or firm's cylinder without such company's or firm's written authorization. So basically, the most common that we can think of to illustrate C is on the refill of butane gases. You also have here petroleum fuel product adulteration. That would mean mixing of any petroleum product with another finished or unfinished petroleum product or stock with any non-petroleum substance or material that will result in product quality change or resulting in the failure of such finished petroleum product to meet the required product specification as prescribed by the Product Standards Agency of the DTI. For the purpose of this definition, finished petroleum product refers to any of the following: premium gasoline, regular gasoline, aviation gasoline, aviation turbo fuel, kerosene, diesel fuel, industrial fuel, or packaged lube oils. So this definition, though, shall not apply to alcohol gas and oil emulsions. So those are considered to be petroleum fuel product adulteration included in the definition of illegal trading. Hoarding and overpricing are also acts constituting illegal trading. So the hoarding there is the undue accumulation of a trader of petroleum and or petroleum products beyond his or its normal inventory levels. So you have their hoarding. Overpricing in the sense that the sale of petroleum and or petroleum products at prices in excess of those authorized by the government or the DOE. So those are the most common acts constituting illegal trading. RA 8484 or the Access Device Regulation Act of 1998. What is an access device? It means any card, plate, code, account number, electronic serial number, personal identification number, or other telecommunications service equipment or instrument identifier, or other means of account access that can be used to obtain money, goods, services, or any other thing of value or to initiate a transfer of funds other than a transfer originated solely by paper instrument. So think of the access devices that you have right now. It could be your ATM, The most common is your ATMs. And you also have their debit card, credit card. What else? Take note, anything that could be used to initiate or transfer funds that you can use to obtain money, goods, or services. You also have there your valid ID, like the UMED, wherein you can also use it to access to obtain your money from the GSIS, Pag-ibig, or SSS for that matter. So those are examples of access device. Other terms that you need to familiarize yourself for purposes of RA 8484 is the term counterfeit access device. What is a counterfeit access device? Any access device that is counterfeit, fictitious, altered, or forged, or an identifiable component of an access device or counterfeit access device. They are considered to be counterfeit access device. How about unauthorized access device? This would mean and to include stolen, lost, expired, revoked, canceled, suspended, or obtained with intent to defraud. Okay, those access devices that are stolen or lost, or expired, or revoked, canceled, suspended, or obtained with intent to defraud, they are included in the term unauthorized access device. You also have their access device fraudulently applied for. This means any access device that was applied for or issued on account for the use of falsified document, false information, fictitious identities and addresses, or any form of false pretense or misrepresentation constituting access device fraudulently applied for. And then you have there your definition of a credit card. What are the prohibited acts under the law? The following shall constitute access device fraud and shall be declared unlawful. You have there the producing, using, or trafficking of one or more counterfeit access device, or unauthorized access device, or access device fraudulently applied for. It would also include using, with intent to defraud, an unauthorized access device. Using an access device fraudulently applied for, or possessing one or more counterfeit access devices. Producing, inducing, enticing, permitting, in consideration of another, to the use, traffic, or in counterfeit access device, unauthorized access device, or access devices fraudulently applied for. So by those terms, counterfeit, unauthorized access device fraudulently applied for, using, possessing, trafficking of all of these cards or access device are punishable under the law. It would also include multiple imprinting on more than one transaction record, sales slip or similar document, thereby making it appear that the device holder has entered into a transaction other than those which said device holder had lawfully contracted for. What else? You also have there disclosing any information imprinted on the access device. You also have there obtaining money or anything of value through the use of an access device with intent to defraud or with intent to gain and fleeing thereafter. Having in one's possession without authority from the owner of the access device or the access device company, an access device or any material such as slips, carbon paper, or any other medium, the transaction slips that is given to you, so that would be included. And then writing or causing to be written on sales slips, approval numbers from the issuer of the access device of the fact of approval, when in fact, no such approval was given, or where if given, what is written is deliberately different from the approval actually given. Now take note that this issuer of credit cards have different policies. Some, even if how spurious the transaction is, they would approve the transaction. Hence, it would be inconvenient on your part because you have to report such unauthorized transaction. There are also issuer of this credit card that when they receive that request for approval, and sensing that this transaction is really spurious, especially if this is outside the normal transaction of that particular holder of that particular access device, they would immediately block your card and disapprove the request. So either way, it would actually cause inconvenience on the part of the lawful holder of the access device. Now, what else are the other punishable acts under the law? Making any alteration without the access device holder's authority. Affecting transaction with one or more access device issued to another person or persons to receive payment or any other thing of value. It would also include, without the authorization of the issuer of the access device, soliciting a person for the purpose of offering an access device or selling information regarding or an application to obtain an access device. You also have there, without the authorization of the credit card system member or its agent, causing or arranging for another person to present to the member or its agent for payment one or more evidence or records of transactions made by credit card. There is also such thing as conspiracy to commit access device fraud. There is also frustrated and attempted access device fraud and accessory to access device fraud. So these are all punished under the law. So just familiarize them. Now take note of these instances because this constitutes prima facie evidence of intent to defraud. Okay, the law presumes intent to defraud on the part of the accused doing the following or any of the following instances: mere possession, control, or custody of an access device without permission of the owner or without any lawful authority. So mere possession. Aside from the fact, if you are also in possession of a counterfeit access device, if you are in possession of an access device fraudulently applied for, or you are in possession of any device making or altering equipment by any person whose business or employment does not lawfully deal with the manufacture, issuance, or distribution of access device, and if you are in possession of an access device or medium on which an access device is written, not in the ordinary course of the possessor's trade or business. And to continue that prima facie evidence of intent to defraud, if a genuine access device is in possession of the person, not the registered name as appearing in the card. So that is also prima facie evidence of intent to defraud. Now take note of section 14. A card holder who abandons or surreptitiously leaves the place of employment, business, or residence stated in his application or credit card without informing the credit card company of the place where he could actually be found, if at the time of such abandonment or surreptitious leaving, the outstanding and unpaid balance is past due for at least 90 days and is more than 10,000 pesos, shall be prima facie presumed to have used his credit card with intent to defraud. So that's why if the issuer bank would call you, please do not take it for granted because you have their section 14. Before they would refer you to their legal department or to their collecting agent who will be more insistent on calling you for you to pay your outstanding balance. Now, what would be the consequence of a lost access device? Now, in Section 15, it provides that it would absolve the access device holder of any financial liability from fraudulent use of the access device from the time the loss or theft is reported to the issuer. What would be your responsibility as the holder of that access device? Example is a credit card. So what would you do? In case of loss of an access device, the holder thereof must notify the issuer of the access device of the details and circumstances of such loss upon knowledge of the loss. Okay? You must notify, let's say, promptly upon knowledge of the loss, so that from the time that you reported the loss and there would be transactions that will be done with the use of that lost access device, you will not be made to pay the financial liability appearing or being transacted after your time of notifying the issuer of the access device. In Section 17, it provides that prosecution under this act shall be without prejudice to any liability for violation of any provision of the RPC or any other law. Okay, so that is RA 8484. PD 1613. We are talking about simple arson here. So, the arson provision in the RPC is referring to the destructive arson. Destructive arson characterized as a heinous crime. So that is governed by Article 320 of the RPC. So in PD 1613, it governs simple arson. So what is arson in the first place? Would it be just a burning or there is a fire ongoing in your place? Would it be automatically arson? Now, take note that there is only arson if the burning of a property by fire was done maliciously. In other words, there could be accidents that may lead to firing or burning of a property. But that is not arson. Plain and simple fire. Arson is the malicious destruction of property by fire. Who can be made liable? Any person. Okay? Any person who burns or sets fire the property of another shall be punished by prison mayor. Take note, property of another. But in the next paragraph, it would also punish the person who sets fire his own property, with the condition that that circumstance which exposed to danger the life or property of another. So that is in Section 1 of PD 1613. Now let's compare simple arson from destructive arson as provided under Article 320 of the RPC. So the destructive arson provided under Article 320 of the RPC that is characterized as heinous crime, while in PD 1613, it is not. Destructive arson is characterized as grievous, odious, and hateful, wickedness, vicious, atrocity, outrageous, and perversity on the part of the accused. Whereas in PD 1613, it is of lesser degree. And since it is of lesser degree, the penalty is not death as compared to destructive arson, wherein the penalty ranges from reclusion perpetua to death. What are other cases of arson aside from those provided under Article 320 of the RPC? So you have there Section 3 of PD 1613. Burning any building used as office of the government or any of its agencies. So you have there the penalty of reclusion temporal to reclusion perpetua. Any building, any inhabited house or dwelling. So if the property borne is any inhabited house or dwelling, any industrial establishment, shipyard, oil well or mine shaft, platform or tunnel, any plantation, farm, pasture land, growing crop, grain field, orchard, bamboo grove, or forest, any rice mill, sugar mill, cane mill, or mill central, and any railway or bus station, airport, wharf, or warehouse. Now, if you notice, under Section 3, the penalty is dependent on what kind of property is being burned. What are the circumstances that aggravates arson, wherein the maximum penalty shall be imposed? If the arson is committed with intent to gain, if committed for the benefit of another, if the offender is motivated by spite or hatred towards the owner or occupant of the property burned, if committed by a syndicate, and it is committed by a syndicate if it is planned or carried out by a group of 3 or more persons. When death results from arson, what would be its effect as far as the penalty to be imposed is concerned? Or what would be the crime in the first place? If by reason of or on occasion of arson death results, the penalty of reclusion perpetua to death shall be imposed. Now, this presupposes that the principal intent of the accused is not to kill a person. Because if his principal intent is to kill the person, and he uses fire as a means to commit to kill the person, then the crime shall be murder. It is not arson. The following shall be prima facie evidence of arson. Presumption of arson. Prima facie, though this presumption is disputable. Any of the following shall constitute prima facie evidence of arson. If the fire started simultaneously in more than one part of the building or establishment, because how could that be accidental if it started in more than one part of the building? If substantial amount of flammable substances or materials are stored within the building, and that quantity is not necessary in the business of the offender nor of the household. Okay, so those creates a prima facie evidence for arson. Next, if gasoline, kerosene, petroleum, or other flammable or combustible substances or materials soaked therein, or containers thereof, or any mechanical, electrical, chemical, or electronic contrivance designed to start a fire, or ashes or traces of any of the foregoing are found in the ruins or premises of the burned building or property. Now, this is the work or the responsibility of our fire officers. There is fire. Of course, they will put out the fire. Thereafter, they have to conduct an investigation. So in the ruins, if they consider in that there are actually materials soaked in gasoline, to which the fire started, then that would create a prima facie evidence. In other words, the presumption of arson coupled with the result of the investigation conducted by the fire officers would actually substantiate or support the charge for arson, because the investigation there, if it is found out that indeed there are these materials found therein, it would strengthen the case for arson against the accused. What else could be possible? If you can see a lighter therein, so that would create that prima facie evidence. So meaning to say, the investigation would confirm or at least verify the source or what started the fire. If the building or property is insured for substantially more than its actual value at the time of the issuance of the policy, okay, that is another prima facie evidence. Another, if during the lifetime of the corresponding fire insurance policy, more than 2 fires have occurred in the same or other premises owned or under the control of the offender or of the insured. Okay, sige na lang, sunog. If shortly before the fire, a substantial portion of the effects insured or stored in a building or property had been withdrawn from the premises except in the ordinary course of business. So to illustrate this one, if you have there prior to the fire and the department store, for example, is already closed, why is it that there are many 10-wheeler went out from the warehouse of the mall or from the department store, and then the fire started thereafter? So that would create a prima facie evidence. Next, if a demand for money or other valuable consideration was made before the fire in exchange for the desistance of the offender or for the safety of the person or property of the victim. So some sort of blackmailing. So these are prima facie evidence of arson. Now, what would happen to the object of arson? In Section 8, it provides that if the owner, the building which is the object of arson, including the land on which it is situated, shall be confiscated and escheated to the state unless the owner thereof can prove that he has no participation in or knowledge of such arson despite the exercise of due diligence on his part. In other words, if arson is proven, then the land to which the building subject of the fire stands shall be escheated to the state. So let's review a little on the stages of execution. To when shall it be attempted arson, frustrated, or consummated one? A person intending to burn a wooden structure collects some rags, soaks them in gasoline, and places them beside the wooden wall of the building. When he is about to light a match to set fire to the rags, he is discovered by another who chases him away. Under this set of facts, the crime is only attempted arson. Okay, remember, he already collected the rags, he already soaks them in gasoline. However, if he is just caught buying gasoline, so he has not passed through that objective phase in the commission of the crime. And that buying of gasoline would not in any way be concluded as an overt act for purposes of filing a complaint for arson against a person. Let's continue. If that person is able to light or set fire to the rags, but the fire was put out before any part of the building was burned, then the crime is only frustrated arson. But if before the fire was put out, it had burned a part of the building, then that is already considered to be consummated arson. So you have there any charring of the wood of a building whereby the fiber of the wood is destroyed is sufficient to consummate arson. It is not necessary that the wood should be ablaze. Now, take note that the mere fact that a building is scorched or discolored by heat is not sufficient to constitute consummated arson. Setting fire to the contents of a building, meaning to say, the fire was done inside the building. It constitutes consummated crime by setting fire to a building even if no part of the building was burned, considering that the same was done inside the building. So that is considered to be consummated arson already. We have PD 533 or the anti-cattle rustling. What is a large cattle? So that we can apply properly the law. A large cattle as herein used shall include the cow, carabao, horse, mule, ass, or other domesticated member of the bovine family. So what are these animals that is considered to be a member of the bovine family or the Bovidae? It comprised the biological family of cloven hoof ruminant vertebrates that includes bison, African buffalo, water buffalo, antelopes, sheep, goat, mouse, oxen, and domestic cattle. Now, while goat there is included, unfortunately, in our jurisdiction, the Supreme Court, in the case of People versus Nazareno, goats are excluded in the term large cattle. Hence, if what is being taken is a goat, you cannot charge the accused under PD 533. It could only be theft or robbery, as the case may be. So what is cattle rustling? So after knowing what large cattle is, so what is cattle rustling? Cattle rustling is the taking by any means, method, or scheme without the consent of the owner or raiser or of any of the above-mentioned animals when we define large cattle, whether or not for profit or gain, or whether committed with or without violence against or intimidation of any person or force upon things. It includes the killing of large cattle or taking its meat or hide without the consent of the owner or raiser. In other words, for as long as the subject of the taking is a large cattle, except the exemption provided under the law, in that decided case of Nazareno, then you can charge the accused for cattle rustling. Now, take note that if you have there a large cattle, you have there the obligation to register the large cattle. Okay, you have to register the large cattle before the age of 6 months. Where will you register it? In the city or municipal treasurer where such large cattle is raised. And then you will be issued a certificate of ownership to the owner or raiser under Section 3 of the law. If you want to buy or to sell your large cattle, other than that you are a registered owner of the large cattle, you have to secure a permit. A permit for that purpose as provided under Section 5. That is permit to buy and sell large cattle. Now, if you also wanted to ship or transport the large cattle from one province to another, then you have to secure another permit for that purpose. Okay, so aside from the permit to ship, you also have to show the certificate of ownership. What else? Another important provision in PD 533 is that every time whether you are just in possession or you are bringing along with you, walking along with you your large cattle, make sure that you are always in possession of your certificate of registration because you have there the presumption of cattle rustling. Every person having in his possession, control, or custody of large cattle shall, upon demand by competent authorities, exhibit the documents prescribed in the preceding sections. Failure to exhibit the required documents shall be prima facie evidence that the large cattle in his possession, control, or custody are the fruits of the crime of cattle rustling. Anti-hijacking. Now, this law governs because you have their PD 532 on the anti-piracy. So if it is an aircraft, you have there the law on anti-hijacking. So what are the acts punished under the anti-hijacking law? Compelling the pilot of an aircraft of Philippine registry to change course or destination or otherwise usurping or seizing control while it is in flight. Now take note in the first punishable act, it says there aircraft of Philippine registry. What determines the registration of the aircraft? Would it be the nationality of the owner? It is not, but the registration of the aircraft itself. Now, if it is of Philippine registry to constitute a violation under the anti-hijacking law, it is required that when the offender compel the pilot or he usurp or seize the control thereof, that Philippine aircraft must be in flight. As in the bar, when is an aircraft deemed in flight? So an aircraft is in flight when all the external doors thereof are closed following embarkation until opened for disembarkation. Okay? Although it has not moved away, or let's say the after landing, the aircraft is still taxiing. So at that moment, if you commit this particular act of usurping the control, then you are liable because that Philippine aircraft is still considered to be in flight. Now, how about if the aircraft is not of Philippine registry? Meaning to say, of foreign registry. Compelling an aircraft of foreign registry to land in any part of the Philippine territory, or usurping or seizing control of such while it is within Philippine territory, constitute a violation under the anti-hijacking law. Now, take note that if the aircraft is of foreign registry, there is no requirement that the aircraft be in flight. For as long as it is within the Philippine territory, then you can be made liable under the anti-hijacking law. In usurping control, it is not required that the aircraft be a public utility. Disregarding the nature to which that aircraft is used, for as long as you compel the aircraft of foreign registry to land in any part of the Philippine territory, or you usurp or seize the control thereof, you can be made liable under the anti-hijacking law. Now you have there acts that qualifies the first and second punishable act. If you fire upon the pilot, crew, or passenger. If exploding or attempting to explode any bomb or explosive to destroy the aircraft, or if the crime is accompanied by murder, homicide, serious physical injuries, or rape. So the act is qualified, the maximum penalty shall be imposed upon the accused if found guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. Now take note of the other punishable act. You have there carrying or loading on board a passenger aircraft operating as a public utility in the Philippines substances which are corrosive, flammable, explosive, or poisonous. Hence, the mere carrying or loading of explosive, corrosive, flammable or poisonous brings about criminal liability. Okay, the mere carrying. So I have here the definition on what flammable means. You also have there the definition of what an explosive. You have there the definition on what includes a corrosive substance. And then what is a poisonous substance. Anyway, my slides is available to you. What crime is committed if accompanied with death, injury, or damage to property? Would it be just a violation under the anti-hijacking law because it is absorbed in the crime, or it shall be independent, can separately be charged for anti-hijacking? Now, in Section 7, it provides that for any death or injury to persons or damage to property resulting from a violation of Section 3 and 4 of the law, the person responsible therefore may be held liable in accordance with the applicable provisions of the RPC. There is no such absorption because the law authorized prosecution under the RPC. There will be separate crimes for the death, injury, and damage to property in addition to violation of the anti-hijacking law. On your screen are actually 4 kinds of aircraft under treatment in the law. You have there aircraft of Philippine registry. For the law to be applicable, it must be in flight. Aircraft of foreign registry, it need not be in flight. If it is a public utility passenger aircraft, you have there the mere carrying of prohibited substance is a criminal act. If it is a cargo aircraft, the non-compliance with the ATO rules constitutes a criminal act. Anti-Sexual Harassment Act. Of course, you all know this and you have mastered this one, that the Sexual Harassment Act is applicable if it is a work, education, or training-related sexual harassment. And the same is committed by an employer, employee, manager, supervisor, agent of the employer, teacher, instructor, professor, coach, trainer, who has authority, influence, or moral ascendancy over another in a work or training education environment. The same is committed when he demands, requests, or otherwise requires any sexual favor from the other, regardless of whether the demand, request, or requirement for submission is accepted by the object of said act. So take note of WET, work, education, or training related sexual harassment, and you have their aim. As far as the offender is concerned, he has authority, influence, or moral ascendancy over another. Now, take note that the crime is consummated by the mere demand or request of the offender. It is not required that the request or demand be obtained. So that is in Section 3 of the law. What constitutes work or employment-related sexual harassment? So if it is made as a condition of the hiring, employment, re-employment, or continued employment, even on the promotion or the giving of privilege to the offended party, or if the refusal to grant the sexual favor would likewise result in limiting, segregating, or classifying the employee, which in any way would discriminate, deprive, or diminish employment opportunities or otherwise adversely affect said employee. What are the other acts? If it would impair the employee's rights and privileges, or if the above act would result in intimidating, hostile, or offensive environment for the employee. That includes a work, that includes a work or employment related sexual harassment. Next, what is sexual harassment in an education or training environment setting? It is committed against anyone who is under the care, custody, or supervision of the offender. Committed against one whose education, training, apprenticeship, or tutorship is entrusted to the offender. When the sexual favor is made as a condition to giving of a passing grade, granting of honors or scholarships, or the payment of a stipend, allowance, or other benefits, privileges, or considerations. Or when the sexual advances result in an intimidating, hostile, or offensive environment for the student, trainee, or apprentice. Can sexual harassment be committed through conspiracy? The answer is yes, because any person who directs or induces another to commit any of the act of sexual harassment or who cooperates in the commission thereof would also be made liable under this act. Elements of sexual harassment, of course, you have there must be demand, request, or requirement of a sexual favor. The same was made a precondition to hiring, re-employment, or continued employment. The denial thereof results in discrimination against the employee plus the wet and aim. This is enunciated by the High Court in Domingo versus Rayala, GR number 155831. These are the elements of sexual harassment. So by this, we can say that the sexual harassment here is a work-related, was committed in a work-related environment. Other forms of sexual harassment, because some might be saying or take this for granted, and besides, is it our culture, like doing beso-beso, or kissing, embracing, and putting of arms around the shoulder of the woman, and then it would appear that you only do that to that particular woman. So it could be sexual harassment already. So other than those, you also have there overt sexual advances, of course, unwelcome or improper gestures of affection, requests or demand for sexual favors, including but not limited to going out on dates, outings, or the like, or the same purpose, or any other act or conduct of a sexual nature or for purposes of sexual gratification, which is generally annoying, disgusting, or offensive to the victim. By the way, before I forget, especially in a decided case, school-related sexual harassment, it is not limited to being committed in the school, because it may be committed outside of the school campus or outside the school premises during an activity which is school-related. So that would still be punished under the law. And to amend it, but not repealing 7877, you have there the Safe Spaces Act. You have there RA 11313. Please familiarize yourself on the following terms as used in the law. Catcalling. It refers to unwanted remarks directed towards a person, commonly done in a form of wolf whistling, misogynistic, transphobic, homophobic, and sexist slurs. So those are included in the term catcalling. What is gender? So gender refers to a set of socially ascribed characteristics, norm, roles, attitude, values, and expectations, identifying the social behavior of men and women and the relations between them. Okay, it's more on your social environment that affects your gender. If you compare it to sex, sex is referring to the male or female sex, referring to your biological condition of a person at birth. So that is sex as compared to gender. Concept of gender-based online sexual harassment. There is gender-based online sexual harassment on the conduct targeted at a particular person that causes or likely to cause another mental, emotional, or psychological distress and fear of personal safety. Sexual harassment acts included unwanted sexual remarks and comments, threats, uploading or sharing of one's photos without consent, video and audio recording, cyber stalking, and online identity theft. Meaning to say, the sexual harassment was done through the use of an ICT. Now, concept of gender identity and or expression. It refers to the personal sense of identity as characterized among others by manner of clothing, inclination, and behavior in relation to masculine or feminine convention. A person may have a male or female identity with physiological characteristics of the opposite sex, in which case this person is considered transgender. Meaning to say, the person could be male at birth, but gender in his preference as he grow older. So that is the gender identity and or expression. What public spaces includes as used in the law? Because basically this sexual harassment is done in public places. Now, public places refers to streets and alleys, public parks, schools, buildings, malls, bars, restaurants, transportation terminals, public market spaces used as evacuation centers, government offices, public utility vehicles, as well as private vehicles covered by app-based transport network services and other recreational spaces such as, but not limited to, cinema halls, theaters, and spas. So these are considered to be public spaces even if they are owned by private individual because they are used by the public. What is stalking? It refers to conduct directed at a person involving the repeated visual or physical proximity, non-consensual communication, or a combination thereof that cause or will likely cause a person to fear of one's own safety or the safety of others or to suffer emotional distress. What is gender-based streets and public spaces sexual harassment? Because earlier our definition is on the gender-based online sexual harassment. Now we are confronted with this particular definition of a gender-based streets and public spaces sexual harassment. The crimes of gender-based streets and public spaces sexual harassment are committed through any unwanted and uninvited sexual actions or remarks against any person regardless of the motive for committing such action or remarks. What could be an example? So what includes this kind of sexual harassment? Includes catcalling, wolf whistling, unwanted invitation, misogynistic, transphobic, homophobic, and sexist slurs, persistent uninvited comments or gestures on a person's appearance, relentless requests for personal details, statement of sexual comments and suggestions, public masturbation, or flashing of private parts, grouping, or any advances, whether verbal or physical, that is unwanted and has threatened one's sense of personal space and physical safety. So it could also include gestures. So you have there the fact sign, or let's say slurs like saying, hubaga ni mo dayoy. So things like that. So those are actually a violation of the Safe Spaces Acts. What else? Unwanted and has threatened one's sense of personal space and physical safety and committed in public spaces such as alleys, roads, sidewalks, and parks. Acts constitutive of danger-based streets and public spaces sexual harassment are those performed in buildings, schools, churches, restaurants, malls, public washrooms, bars, internet shops, public markets, transportation, terminals, or public utility vehicles. Now, you might be asking, it is also committed in schools, but can you file sexual harassment against him under the Sexual Harassment Act if the element of wet and aim are not attendant of the as one of the elements constituting the crime punished under 7877. So in other words, this can be used by those victims. It may be done in school because sometimes your stalker would also go to school to where you are schooling. So you can have this Safe Spaces Act law to protect your rights. What includes gender-based online sexual harassment? So basically, you have their acts that use information and communication technology. So with the use of the ICT. What qualifies gender-based street, public spaces, and online sexual harassment? It is qualified and the maximum penalty shall be imposed if the same was done in a common carrier or PUV. If the offended party is a minor, a senior citizen, or a person with disability, or a breastfeeding mother nursing her child at the time that the sexual harassment, the gender-based street or public spaces sexual harassment was committed. If the offended party is diagnosed with a mental problem tending to impair consent. If the perpetrator is a member of the uniformed services. If the act takes place in the premises of a government agency offering frontline services to the public, and the perpetrator is a government employee. What includes gender-based sexual harassment in the workplace? It includes act or series of acts involving unwelcome sexual advances, requests, or demand for sexual favors or any act of sexual nature, whether done verbally, physically, or through the use of technology such as text messaging or electronic mail or through any other forms of information and communication system that has or could have detrimental effect on the condition of an individual's employment or education, job performance, or opportunities. It would also include conduct of sexual nature and other conduct based on sex affecting the dignity of the person, which is unwelcome, unreasonable, and offensive to the recipient, whether done verbally, physically, or through the use of technology, such as text messaging or electronic mail, or through any form of IC system. Any conduct that is unwelcome, unpervasive, and creates an intimidating, hostile, or humiliating environment for the recipient. It would also include information and communication system Information and communication system refers to a system of generating, sending, receiving, storing, or otherwise processing electronic data, messages, or electronic documents, and includes the computer system or other similar devices by or in which data are recorded or stored, and any procedure related to the recording or storage of electronic data, messages, or electronic documents. So these are also included in gender-based sexual harassment in the workplace. So it can be done. So this is used as a means to commit the gender-based sexual harassment in the workplace. Now take note that while we have identified many acts punished under the law, you might be asking, because we mentioned earlier that including a mother doing breastfeeding in public. Now, can you also charge her? Because you might be saying that it is her fault. It was her act that prompted the offender of making 6 years slurs, for example, to the victim or to the offended party because she was making breastfeeding in public. Now, in Section 31, it gives an exemption. Then, acts that are legitimate expressions of indigenous culture and tradition. So, other than breastfeeding, and of course, as well as breastfeeding in public, shall not be penalized under the Safe Spaces Act. So this pertains to the woman doing breastfeeding in public. You cannot charge her for violating the Safe Spaces Act and any other act considered as legitimate expression of indigenous culture and tradition. They are outside the coverage of the law. Data Privacy Act. So what constitutes a violation under the Data Privacy Act? So let's just run through this. So it is punishable under the law. Of course, you have there unauthorized processing of personal information and sensitive personal information. Of course, this would be possible if you have their processing by someone of your personal information or sensitive information without your authority. Another punishable act is if someone access your personal information or sensitive personal information due to the negligence of a person who has legitimate data about you. For example, you have there an application for this particular office. So initially, the purpose or that office is in possession of your personal information for a legitimate purpose. However, if that could be accessed by another because of the negligence of that person, then he shall be or she shall be prosecuted under the Data Privacy Act because of the access due to her negligence. You also have there improper disposal of personal information and sensitive personal information, meaning to say that these entities or office who were in possession lawfully of your personal information must dispose properly your information, like the papers. They have to shred it prior to disposal, because if they do it improperly and someone access or uses that particular information of yours, that constitutes a violation of your Data Privacy Act. Now, take note that I just realized that I have some monthly orders wherein there is an attached paper or document with respect to your transaction. Now, you also have to be vigilant. Do not just throw these papers just to get rid of your garbage, because someone might be possibly or which they inadvertently came across that document, and they can actually use those information of yours. So please be careful as well. Please be cautious in disposing your garbage containing your personal information or sensitive and other sensitive personal information, such as your birthdays, because that might be used by other people who have ill will or who have illegal criminal minds. You also have their processing of personal information and sensitive personal information for unauthorized purpose. Of course, that would for sure violate your data privacy. You also have their unauthorized access or intentional breach. When could this be a violation under the Data Privacy Act? Now, take note that these entities in possession legally of your or lawfully of your personal information, they are supposed to keep it confidential. Now, if they shall be made liable if they unlawfully or violated the data confidentiality knowingly. Okay, for their failure to break in any way into any system where personal information is stored. So because of that, there is that violation of the confidentiality of your data stored with a particular entity. So they can be made liable under this unauthorized access or intentional breach. Take note that that particular entity as well, if that breach happens, they ought to tell you about the breach. If they intentionally or by omission conceals the fact of such security breach, then they can be made liable under Section 30 of the law. Okay? Because of concealment of security breach involving sensitive personal information. At least it would warn their clients that there is such breach so that they can be vigilant over their accounts, just like changing passwords for that matter. So if they failed to inform, then that would be a violation under the law. Malicious disclosure is likewise another act punished under the law. So disclosure of unwarranted or false information, if done maliciously or in bad faith, it is punishable under the law. You will also have their unauthorized disclosure. And then, when is the crime deemed committed in large scale? The crime is deemed committed in large scale if at least 100 persons is harmed, affected, or involved as a result of the above-mentioned acts punished under the Data Privacy Act. So it is deemed committed in large scale. And what does this mean? What does it mean? The crime is qualified. The maximum penalty shall be imposed upon the accused. RA 11648, this is actually the law that promote stronger protection against rape, sexual exploitation, and abuse by increasing the age of determining the commission of statutory rape, thereby amending the provision of the Anti-Rape Law, Republic Act 7610, or also known as Special Protection of Children Against Child Abuse, Exploitation, and Discrimination Act. So basically, under this amendment, it just increase the age of increasing the age of consent. Now, in this particular slide, it shows the amendment as far as Article 266A as amended, also known as amended by Republic Act 8353, also known as the Anti-Rape Law. Now, if you remember in Article 266A, when rape and when rape and how the same is committed, you have there 4 instances. And the last one is when the offended party is, instead of under 12, you have there under 16 years of age or is demented. So the under 12 is changed to under 16. Now, included in the amendment is a defense on the part of the accused. What is the defense all about? That there shall be no criminal liability on the part of the person having carnal knowledge of another under 16 when the age difference between the parties is not more than 3 years. Okay, that is one requirement. The age difference is not more than 3 years, and take note, and the sexual act in question is proven to be consensual, non-abusive, and non-exploitative. So that is the condition of that defense provided under the amendment. Provided further that if the victim is under 13 years of age, this exception shall not apply. So it says under 13, meaning to say, it shall be applicable, the defense shall be applicable if the woman is at least 13, because the same is not applicable if the woman is under 13. So next question, when do we say that the carnal knowledge or the sexual intercourse is consensual and that the same is non-abusive and non-exploitative? So by the word consensual, meaning to say we can say that the woman gives her consent. But the question is, when shall it be non-abusive? When shall it be non-exploitative? So as used in the law, it is non-abusive when there is absence of undue influence, intimidation, fraudulent machination, coercion, threat, physical, sexual, psychological, or mental injury or maltreatment, either with intention or through neglect during the conduct of the sexual intercourse with the child victim. And it is also non-exploitative when there is no actual or attempted act or acts of unfairly taking advantage of the child's possession of vulnerability, differential power, or trust during the conduct of sexual activities. Now, in one of my presentation of a child specialist, this age difference that is being represented to by the amendment, they term this as an act of exploration, experimental on the part of this age group doing the carnal knowledge. So this is actually a welcome amendment. So if those are really people or the person really engaged in consensual sexual intercourse, especially in the present times where our young adults are actually sexually active, sad to say, it should not be also used as a means of putting the other person in a situation that he will also be traumatized, put in prison, or made to suffer out of that consensual experimental act of them. So that is the provision. So you have there the defense available as far as the accused is concerned. So other provisions, so with respect to qualified seduction and simple seduction, so it says there, if the seduction of a minor 16 and over, so from 12 and over to 16 and over, so basically it increases the age of the victim. The other amendment is on simple seduction. It also states 16 and over, but under 18. So from 12 and over, but under 18. As far as RA 7610 is concerned, so under Section 5B, instead of the under 12, it is under 16 years of age. And then the last portion is under 16 still. So the under 12 is changed to under 16. So those are the amendment. You also have there in child trafficking under section 7610 still, you have there under 16 years of age from under 12. On other acts of neglect and abuse under section 10 of 7610, any person who shall keep or have in his company a minor 16 years of age or under, or who is 10 years of or more of his junior. So take note of the amendment. So with that, I thank you for your time, and I wish you all the best in your preparation for the upcoming bar exam. Thank you.